Hello, welcome back to IM Movies. Today, we're covering the 2021 thrilling suspense movie, The Guilty, which is a true crime event. It revolves around a troubled 911 operator, grappling with personal demons. When he receives a harrowing emergency call, his world unravels in real time, as he races against the clock to save a kidnapped woman while confronting his own haunting past. Before we get started, be sure to give us a thumbs up, drop a comment, and hit the subscribe button to stay updated. With that said, let's get started. The movie begins with Joe Baylor, who's an LAPD officer that had been demoted to a 911 operator in Los Angeles. He's working the night shift at a 911 emergency call center, which he doesn't like. That night, many emergency calls came, as wildfires were spreading in California, making evacuation hard. Plus, there's a lot of crime in Los Angeles, and the police can't help everyone. While he's working, his phone rang, and a reporter named Catherine Harbor from the LA Times keeps pushing Joe for his side of the story, but Joe just says he won't comment.
As I said, no comment.
We then learn that Joe has a trial tomorrow for something that he has done 8 months ago. After that, his supervisor, Sergeant Wade, warns him for answering personal calls inside their workplace. Joe takes a break and goes for a coffee. He realizes how tough and important his job as a 911 dispatcher is. He then goes out to call his ex-wife to talk to his daughter, but it's just a voicemail who answers him. After that, he sits back at his desk. On his first call coming back, Joe gets a strange call from someone named Emily Lighton. At first, he's confused and thinks the caller might be drunk or mistaken, but then he hears a man's voice in the background, and he realizes something serious is happening. Emily pretends to talk to her child on the phone, but she's actually trying to let Joe know she's been kidnapped and taken out of the city. After figuring out where Emily is, Joe puts her on hold and calls the police for help. They ask about the kidnapper's car, and Joe says he'll be right back to help with that. During the process, the dispatcher learns that the kidnapper's car is a white van.
What are we looking for?
A white van.
Which makes the situation even tense. The kidnapper starts to suspect something's not right, and Emily has to end the call. Joe tells Emily to stay calm and call him back when she can. While keeping an eye on Emily's location using GPS, Joe calls the police patrol again and tells them what to do, but it's not really his job anymore. Still, the patrol goes to where Emily is, closes the access road, and checks all the white vans passing by. They spot a white van, but it's not the right one. The police ask Joe to find out the license plate number of the white van so they can identify it easily. First, Joe looks up Emily's address and home phone number in the police records. When he calls, Emily's 6-year-old son Abby answers the phone. Abby is scared, and he tells Joe that earlier, his dad Henry came to their house with a knife and made his mom get into the car. This left Abby alone with his little brother Oliver, who is now sleeping in the bathroom. Realizing this, he wants to bring someone to help out the kids, since there's no guardian. Upon hearing this, Joe quickly looked up information about Henry in the police database. He found all sorts of details about Henry, from his address and car plate number to his history of committing crimes and being in and out of prison many times. After seeing this information, Joe becomes convinced that Emily's husband is the kidnapper and that Emily is a victim of domestic violence. At the same time, Joe keeps getting calls from Catherine, the reporter, who wants to know his side of the story, so she can write an article for tomorrow's trial. Joe gets mad for being distracted and hangs up the call. Worried about disturbing other people in the customer service area, Joe decides to change rooms and tries to reach out to his superiors for guidance. In the other room, Joe logs into a different computer. He then phones his colleague in the LAPD, Sergeant Bill Miller, to help, but Bill gets angry.
Abducted.
That's enough. It's enough. What are you trying to do?
And tells him to focus on solving his own case rather than helping others. Joe's trial was scheduled for tomorrow, and his superiors had instructed all Los Angeles police officers to give false testimony to help him escape the law. They wanted to protect the reputation of the police. His boss also told Joe to serve his sentence as a 911 customer service operator, following the standard procedure. He shouldn't get too deeply involved in other people's problems. Once his sentence was over, Joe could return to being a field police officer again. Hearing his boss's words, Joe was silent. Memories of his case from a few months ago came flooding back. Joe then called his wife and reminded her to come to court tomorrow, according to the trial schedule. He asked her to give false testimony to help him. His wife didn't really want to be involved, but she felt sorry for Joe because he asked for her help every day. She promised to come to court tomorrow. Feeling a bit relieved, Joe waited for a call from Emily. He didn't care if his boss told him not to get involved. As a police officer, Joe couldn't ignore people who needed help. He was determined to find a way to help Emily, no matter what. Not long after, Abby, Emily's daughter, called Joe. Abby told him that the police had just arrived.
Police officer.
Joe told Abby to give his phone to the police. The police sounded panicked when they saw that Abby's hands were covered in blood, even though she wasn't injured at all. Hearing this, Joe panicked too. When they examined the scene, the police became even more frantic. They found Oliver, Emily's son, lying stiff in the bathroom.
There's bloodstains on the floor.
His whole body was covered in blood, and his stomach had been cut open. In the middle of their conversation, the phone hung up. Joe, who was very angry because he thought Henry had done something wrong, he called the number of Henry and pretended to be a police officer and told Henry that he knew about the bad things Henry did to his wife and kids. Henry was scared and couldn't talk properly. Joe threatened Henry that he is going back to jail, and if jail wouldn't be enough to punish him, he promised he would make sure Henry got the death penalty. Hearing this, Henry hung up the phone. After that, Joe asked his co-worker Rick at the police station for help. In a noisy place filled with laughter, Joe realized that Rick must be drinking at the bar and is not at the police station. Concerned, Joe reminded Rick not to drink too much, as they had to testify in court the next day, just like Joe's wife had earlier. Rick was worried that his lies would be uncovered. However, Joe reassured Rick that everything would be all right, promising not to cause any more trouble after the case was over. Joe comforted Rick. Joe then brought up Emily's case and asked Rick to search Henry's apartment for clues about her kidnapping. As Rick left, Emily unexpectedly called Joe on the line and pretended to talk to her daughter Abby. Joe inquired about Emily's situation inside the car, and she revealed that she was sitting in the front seat of a car beside Henry. Curious, Joe asked Emily about the car's speed. Emily, not knowing much about cars, could only say that the car was going so fast that it scared her. Amid their conversation, Henry's voice grew furious, and he tried to grab the cell phone from Emily's hand, causing a disturbance. Joe, hearing the chaos, urgently inquired if Henry was wearing a seatbelt. Emily replied that he wasn't. After getting a sense of the situation in the car, Joe instructed Emily to promptly put on her seatbelt and then pull the handbrakes as hard as she could.
I need you to pull the handbrake hard.
The call abruptly disconnected, leaving Joe anxiously hoping for an update from Emily. While he waited, he contacted the patrol police to track the last GPS location on Emily's phone. Minutes seemed to drag on until Emily finally called back. She informed Joe that his initial plan had failed. When she attempted to escape earlier, Henry managed to capture her, and now she was locked in the back of the van.
Put me in the back of the
Just
van.
listen.
Joe tried to comfort Emily by assuring her that he had a second plan. Curious about what tools were available, Joe asked Emily to check. After searching, Emily found a brick.
Bricks.
Joe then instructed Emily to be prepared, so that when the car comes to a stop and Henry opened the back door of the van, Emily needs to wield the brick with all her strength to strike Henry's head. While Joe talks to Emily, he had a calming effect on her, and she found solace in venting her feelings. Emily couldn't understand why Henry had become so angry, especially when all she was trying to do was help their second child, Oliver, who seemed to be in pain from a mysterious ailment. Joe, growing perplexed by the situation, urged Emily to recount every detail she could remember. Emily explained that their son, Oliver, had been crying relentlessly throughout the day, as if he were enduring a severe stomachache. Out of sympathy for her suffering child, Emily had made a tough decision. She had resolved to bear the pain herself, somehow relieving Oliver of his distress. Now, with her son finally free from agony, Emily's heart swelled with relief.
Please tell me he's fine.
Listening to Emily's emotional account, Joe fell into a contemplative silence. It became apparent that his suspicions had been completely off the mark. Shortly after this chaotic event, Rick called Joe. He had made a significant discovery while searching Henry's house, a bill from a mental hospital with Henry's wife's name on it.
Paid bills from Patton State Hospital. She was a patient there.
This revelation left Joe trembling with shock. He urgently attempted to call Henry, and when the phone was answered, he could hear Henry's painful cries, his head covered in blood from the brick blow. In this moment of agony, Henry confessed the truth to Joe. His intention in taking Emily had been to bring her back to the mental hospital. However, he was aware that the hospital would refuse due to his unpaid bills and lack of money. Nonetheless, Henry remained determined to go there because he wanted to protect his children. Despite their divorce, he still loved Emily deeply. Henry was gripped by fear that the police would discover Emily's actions, leading to his arrest. As the call ended, Joe couldn't help but feel responsible for the unfolding crisis. He regretted intervening in Emily's escape and meddling in the affairs of others, believing that if he hadn't, this tragic series of events might have been avoided. In a later call, Emily informed Joe that she was on a flyover. While Joe asked her question after question, Emily suddenly became frantic. She noticed a lot of blood on her hands,
I have blood on my hands.
and it triggered a distressing memory of what she had done to her own biological child. Overwhelmed with guilt and sorrow, Emily cried and expressed deep regret, repeatedly saying that she didn't deserve to live in this world anymore. Despite attempts to comfort her, Emily remained in a state of hysterical crying. She even mentioned that she wanted to jump off the flyover to be with Oliver in heaven. Joe's heart ached, and he reassured Emily that, no matter her past mistakes, she still deserved to live and find a way through this difficult situation. The conversation continued, revealing a heavy burden that Joe had been carrying. He confessed that if there was anyone who didn't deserve to live in this world, it was himself. Joe could empathize with Emily's overwhelming guilt because he had also taken lives while being consumed by grief. With a heavy heart, Joe began to recount his own sins. He described the incident that led to his current predicament just a few months ago.
I killed a man.
While he was still working as a field police officer, he made a tragic mistake. In a moment of confusion, Joe misfired his weapon, unintentionally causing the death of a 19-year-old young man on the street. Joe shared the painful truth that he was scheduled to attend the first trial of his murder case the next day, a looming consequence of his actions. Joe explained that he and Emily felt the same way. They both had done wrong things and regretted them deeply. However, he reminded Emily that Abby and Henry always supported her. Hearing Joe's words eased Emily's heart. But when they heard a siren and saw a police car approaching, Emily got scared again. She insisted on going to heaven to find Oliver. Suddenly, the phone call got disconnected. Joe felt very sad and kept calling Emily repeatedly, even though her number was no longer active. Eventually, someone answered Joe's call, but it was not Emily, it was the police. They told Joe that they had rescued Emily before she jumped. Upon hearing this news, Joe burst into tears of happiness. A few minutes later, his boss arrived to inform him that Emily's second child, Oliver, had also been saved and was currently receiving medical care at the hospital. After a moment of relief, Joe goes to the bathroom and has a realization. He sees that Emily's situation is similar to his own problems. Feeling determined, Joe calls Rick and asks him to change his previous statement about the accident. He wants Rick to tell the truth in court, even if it means Joe going to prison for many years. Surprisingly, Joe also contacts the Los Angeles Times and tells a reporter Catherine that he plans to admit his guilt for manslaughter. He is ready to accept responsibility for his past crime. In a news report, it's announced that Officer Joe Baylor has indeed confessed to manslaughter in connection with a shooting involving a police officer. As the movie comes to a close, the quote, "Broken people save broken people," seems to be perfect for this movie, and it explains why Joe tried so ferociously to help Emily, even after it's revealed that she hurt her own child. It underscores Joe's own need for personal growth and healing. The movie ends here. What are your thoughts on the film? Feel free to leave a comment to share your thoughts. Don't forget to hit the like button, share this recap, and subscribe to stay updated for the next one. Until next time, thanks for watching and see you at the next one.